How are you?
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Oh, yeah.
Back up!
Oh,
No!
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Back up!
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Hey, man. I can ask the doing. Please back up.
Oh, yeah.
Back up!
Oh, yeah.
Back up!
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode. In today's video, we're going to be covering a body cam footage out of Fairfax, Virginia on September 16th when officers responded to a simple welfare check and were greeted by a 6'6" woman armed with a knife who tried to stab an officer, which resulted in an officer-involved shooting. This is the Shots Fired podcast. I'm Kyle Schoberg, and this is Mark Redlich. Before we get started in today's video, let's hear a word from today's sponsor.
Kyle, how important is it to have a reliable network during a critical incident?
It's everything. We need to be able to connect with our teams and share critical information before we arrive on scene. Having a delay or failure in connectivity can put our entire call for service at risk.
That's why we're excited to share an upcoming podcast episode about Verizon Frontline, the advanced network and technology for first responders, which will be released in 2 weeks. They've been working closely with public safety agencies to design, deploy, and manage connected vehicle solutions so that first responders can be confident in their decision-making and prepared for critical incident response.
We'll be breaking down critical incidents and highlighting how Verizon Frontline provides first responders with reliable solutions to help keep teams connected. Tune in November 1st. You won't want to miss it.
On the morning of September 16th, a mental health counselor contacted the Fairfax County Sheriff's Office requesting a welfare check be done on 33-year-old Sidney Wilson, stating she was in a state of agitation. Now, the Fairfax County Sheriff's Office has a specific team that responds to mental health calls and they provide assistance. But in this incident, that team was tied up on another call for service. So a solo officer who has 14 years of experience responded to this call and ended up making contact at the door to check on Sidney Wilson. So let's talk about what a welfare check is, how often they happen, and really what can you do during a welfare check, or what is the expectations of law enforcement when you go to a welfare check?
Yeah, I think we get a lot of welfare checks in law enforcement, ranging from someone might call and say, hey, I can't get a hold of my grandma for 2 or 3 days. Can you go check on them? Or, hey, my neighbor's newspapers are piled up in front of their door. Can you go check on them? And sometimes those do end in tragedy where you go to the house and you find that the neighbor or grandma is deceased inside the house. And so officers go in and verify that. But you also get welfare check calls where hospitals call because maybe a patient is calling them and they're, making threats of harm against themselves. You get doctor's offices that call because patients don't show up to their doctor visits or, the list goes on of the type of welfare check calls that cops go on. They're not one specific type of call. In this case, it was a mental health crisis worker who was on the phone with Sidney because she was having some type of conversation with him about her mental health, which we don't know a whole lot about. And he felt it necessary, based on maybe her tone of voice or the things that she was saying, that he wanted to have law enforcement go check on her at the house. Now, maybe the mental health worker assumed that a mental health crisis worker teamed up with the officer was going to go to the house. But in this case, because they were tied up, and we could touch on that real quick, that has become a growing trend with teaming social workers up with law enforcement officers. At my agency, we use them as well, and it's very effective because they have proper training. Now, I do want people to understand that at least in the state of California, and I know most states, you're required to take a certain amount of hours of crisis intervention training. All police officers are. So it's not like you're not, just because you don't have a social worker with you, you're still trained on that stuff and how to deal with, people that are having mental health crisis. So like you said, in this case, they were tied up. So this officer chooses to go by himself. Now we talk a lot about do you go to calls by yourself? Obviously, if you're in an area where you have multiple officers and you have partners with you, like we always advocate, don't go to calls by yourself. Bring a partner with you. Mm-hmm. At least in my agency, generally speaking, you're not supposed to go to any call by yourself. You always have a partner. Even a low level call to obviously a more high priority call, and you're going to get more officers. But in this case, I don't know. I mean,
we don't really even have the information of what was provided to that officer. So I assume that the mental health counselor, when they contacted law enforcement, had to provide some information to dispatch for them to generate a call for service. We just don't know what that information is, but it had to have been enough, or maybe not enough, where one officer felt it was safe enough for them to respond by themselves. Because you're right, mental health calls, I would never go by myself. I'd wait for resources, but we don't know what information this officer had.
Yeah, and we don't know how many cops were on duty at that time. But
Right.
and if I'm putting myself in his shoes and I got dispatched to a call where a doctor wanted me to go check on somebody because they seem agitated on the phone, I mean, I'm not even saying don't go by yourself to something like that. Like, I don't know, that to me, I would have to do research on that person. And, you know, heck, they obviously have a phone number for her because she called the doctor. So I would probably go a step further and just get the phone number from that doctor and then maybe drive to the house or apartment complex and call her and see what she has to say. A lot of times nowadays, especially if you have somebody that's threatening harm to themselves with a weapon, I'm certainly not going to the house or apartment. We'll stage down the street, call that person. Hey, how are you feeling? Or are you do you want to help? I mean, we're here to assist you. Do you want to go to the hospital? We ask them all those things. At the end of the day, if they say no, and you don't have a crime, we're walking away from that.
Yeah. And what I would do is I would even go a step further and contact that mental health counselor and start talking with that person and try and get some background of the person that I'm doing this welfare check on. They might give you a couple good nuggets, or it might just be like, this person's never called in before. We're kind of concerned and we're going to go out to the,
you could run into some HIPAA stuff too, where maybe they're going to say, hey, client, privilege, not allowed to release information, but
it's worth a try.
It's worth a try for sure. To know a little bit as much of history on that person as you can. So whatever, he goes to the call by himself. If we're going to break the video down, let's watch up to the point where he makes contact with her. She actually answers the door and then briefly greets him and then shuts the door.
Yep.
Hi, man. I'm Officer Liu.
So I want to point out a couple things just about tactics and overall officer safety and looking in the environment where you're at. This officer is really close to that door. I know you have to knock on the door, so you're going to get up close to knock on it. But we would recommend stepping back, and especially a mental health situation, never standing directly in line of the door. They call that the fatal funnel, where generally people shoot directly through the door. You'd be in indirect line of that. You would want to stand off to the side. But in this situation, standing maybe like 10 or 15 feet back. So then the person on the other side of the door looks through the people and sees you at a distance, and that's really showing you're non-threatening. You're not right up on the door, and I would feel more comfortable answering a door if someone was knocking on it that was further away than really close to it.
Yeah, it brings up I'll share a quick story. One night on patrol, dealt with a DV call and contacted the victim away from the house. She swears that there was no guns in the house. This guy was on parole. Bad dude, but swears no guns in the house. Well, anytime anybody tells me that anyways, I always assume there's going to be a firearm in the house. But we go to this apartment to make contact with him, and we're kind of stacked up at the door. We ended up stacking up off the like a 45 off the door of the hinge. And as we're knocking, he's not answering. Our intentions were going to breach the door and go in. And we gave it one last knock before somebody was actually about to come up and breach this front door. And the guy was on the other side of it and fired at us with a sawed-off shotgun through the front door. And I remember like chunks of wood flying at us. And then he shot out, there was a sliding glass door because it was an apartment on the balcony. He shot the sliding glass door out. And obviously we retreated down the stairs. But after that, I don't think I've ever in my entire career, going on 19 years now, that was probably 10 years ago, I've never stood in front of a door for that reason. I mean, we got incredibly lucky. Had one of us been standing in front of that door or breached that door to go in, one of us would have probably been killed. So
that's the reason that you don't stand in the doorway.
Just never know. And I would say you just always want to make it a habit to just never do it on any call, because if you condition yourself to not do it ever, then you're going to find yourself in a better odds if, like in this situation, she came out with a knife, or if somebody fires at you through the door. So
yeah. Well, he knocks on the door, and she ends up almost immediately opening it, looks at him, says something. He introduces himself briefly, and then she shuts the door. But you could see most of her. She's wearing like a robe. Mm-hmm. And at that point, to me, she's fine. She doesn't want to talk to me. I've introduced myself as law enforcement. She knows I'm the police. She looks fine, shuts the door. To me, I'm basically done at that point.
Yeah,
the
I'm out of
welfare
there.
check is done. I'm going to walk away, and then I'm going to contact the mental health counselor, say I knocked on the door. This person seemed fine. They didn't want to talk to me. I don't really have anything else at that point.
Yeah, I think as cops, cops got to evaluate, like, why am I here? What is the purpose of it? And do I have a crime? Do I have a legal authority to do anything with this lady? And honestly, I mean, at the end of the day, if you're just there to see if this woman's agitated, I would suggest leaving also. I mean, you have absolutely nothing. I would have left. And I probably just would have followed up with maybe the social worker, or the social worker that works with the cops who's embedded. Yeah. Here's the information. This is the call that we got, and have them follow up later with her via phone call or whatever. But,
and especially going on calls like this, if you have information that someone's agitated and they're in their home, and in this case, he ended up remaining at the door, right on the door, and he ended up knocking on it for almost 3 minutes, respectfully knocking. He wasn't pounding, and he was saying, you're not in any trouble. Can you please answer the door? I'd like to talk to you. I want to make sure you're okay. But 3 minutes is a really long time. And especially if I can only imagine if you're going through some type of mental health crisis, or you're completely agitated, something's going on, and now you have a police officer at the door and you shut it, and they're not going away and they keep knocking, like that's just going to compound and just keep building, and you're creating even more agitation.
Yeah. So in the video, we can't play it because it'll copyright us, but she actually blares music. So she answers it, shuts the door, and then she cranks up the music that she's listening to. I think if you're listening or watching to this, those are important things to key in on.
Yeah.
That something is not right here, because that to me is not normal behavior. She shuts the door on the cops. She knows the cops are there. And then she's obviously going through some type of mental health issue. And then now she's cranking up music. I think that's something to register as a cop. Like, all right, this isn't normal. And I think I'm going to back out or whatever. And let's say you did have a crime and you, for whatever reason, needed to make contact with that person. I still think those are little things that need to register with you for your overall safety.
Yeah.
Like, don't disregard those little things,
Yeah. Okay. So he ends up waiting there almost 3 minutes, and then out of nowhere, the door flies open and she comes swinging out with this huge knife, trying to basically slash at him. And as she says that, she calmly says, "How are you?" Like it's odd behavior for sure.
How are you?
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Oh,
Hey,
yeah.
back up.
Oh,
No.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Back up.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Hey, man. I got nothing to do with it. Please back up.
Oh, yeah.
Back up.
Oh, yeah.
Back up. Back up. Five to the one, bubble.
Well, that's absolutely scary. Yeah. I mean, she
Yes.
was like in a completely different state of mind.
Oh yeah.
He's incredibly lucky that knife was big and that thing didn't hit him in the neck,
Yes.
chest, or in the face when she swung that at him. I'm glad he was able to get out of the way in time. But some people I think our vests stop punctures from knives, and they don't. So
No.
our vests that we wear as police officers, they do not stop knives from penetrating. Now, if you work in a prison or a jail facility, they wear different kind of vests than we do, because they're not worried about bullets. They're worried about sharp edges and knives. So our vests don't stop that. So had she even stuck him in the chest, it would have went right through that thing. So he ends up backing up. Now here's where I think, as we'll watch the video, we can only watch some of it. And look, we always get crap sometimes because like, oh, you didn't play the full video. Well, here's the deal. These are YouTube rules, not our rules, right? We'll get it censors it. So if you want to watch the full video, it's in the description. You can click the link. But where I think things go really bad is the officer clearly did not want to have to shoot her.
Yes.
She put him in a situation where he did not have a choice. You can see in the video, he can either go down, he can either make a right step into a different hallway, which would have went all the way down, and we can talk about that in a sec. What are your options then? But he backs himself up into a dead end. It goes into a door. I mean, this woman is 6'6". She's huge, much bigger than him, and she's armed with a huge knife. The officer has to draw the line in the sand and decide what is his threshold of letting her advance towards him with that knife before he starts shooting. I think he waited way too long, trying to give her the benefit of the doubt, which is fine, but you also have to make that choice and decision in your head. This is a line in the sand for me, and if they cross that line, I'm within what is the 21-foot rule with an edge weapon. If someone's within 21 feet, they can get to you quicker than you can fire at them. Something else to note is...
I think it's from a holster position, 21 feet, they can get to you faster than you can unholster and fire.
Right, but even if you're within that 21 feet, I mean, we've been in shootings ourselves. Like, when you shoot somebody, they don't just immediately go down all the time. You might miss. You might not hit a part of their body if their adrenaline's going. Like, they're still going to advance on you. So...
And this is unique, too, because she's not sprinting at him. Mm-mm. She's like slow walking, arm up over her head.
Well, at one point she backs up actually,
yeah,
and then
she does listen to him. He said it almost 8 times, like back up, get back, please get back. But her voice sounds odd, like she's making weird statements. Like it's all alarming. And then you're right. To me, that's a suicide by cop at that point, which is a tragic situation for both people to be put in that position to deal with. But yeah, he waited way too long. And in those situations, I understand and have compassion for waiting and not wanting to shoot someone, but he is absolutely backed into a corner. He has zero ability to rescue himself. His only option at that point is lethal force to prevent her from harming or killing him. I mean, she's already demonstrated that. Mm-hmm. Not listening to commands, and you're waiting for someone to get too close. Now, we know there are guns. You do have times when you have malfunctions. You have to do the tap rack and I'm drawing a blank on it for some reason, but you have to be prepared for that. And to let this lady get so close, and in fact, I think she actually touches him first before he shoots.
I think, yeah. So when she slashes at him the first time, I don't think she hits him. I think it was the second time when she got really close. She slashes him again. I think that's when she gets him, and then he's firing. He ends up actually having to run around to get around her, so he's not backed up against that door. And then he ends up firing again. So,
well, he ends up shooting twice. The first time.
So let's talk about that too.
So I think with my experience being in a shooting and only shooting 2 times, but also the countless days and months spent on a range, shooting 2 times, to me, that's a training scar. That's a training scar where you're being told and instructed. And I think you really should think about the amount of times you've been at the range and your range master, the person that's running you through a drill or through a shoot, the course of fire, they're telling you what to shoot. And this is the part where I actually disagree with that. I understand a course of fire, but as an officer, you need to be able to make that determination of what is reasonable to stop a threat. And a lot of shoots are 2 rounds, center of mass, like fire 2 rounds and step back. And they're telling you over and over, you're only shooting 2. So you're so used to shooting 2 times, where in this case, I think that's actually what happened, where he only fired twice and that was it. And the threat wasn't eliminated.
No, you see it all the time. It happened to you, you said. So
yeah.
You do see it all the time where cops will shoot 1. I think when cops shoot 1 round, generally speaking, if you watch cameras where they do that, I think most of the time that's an AD.
Yeah, like they were startled.
They got startled and fired 1 round. And then if firing 2 rounds, I agree. I think it's a total training thing, because they say train, shoot until the threat is eliminated. But if you're training cops to only ever shoot twice, you're conditioning them to do that. So then in a super stressful situation like this, you're going to revert back to your training. So 100% I agree with you that I don't like constantly training yourselves to only shoot twice.
Yeah, and-
I'm not saying mag dump and
Yeah.
all of that, but when you're at the range, obviously you can't just fucking unload your entire magazine, right? Like you have to be disciplined. But in real life, you do have to shoot till the thread is down. And sometimes shooting 2 times, 3 times. I've been in a couple different shootings where I've shot somebody multiple times and they did not stop. You have to be able to recognize that. And I think conditioning yourself to only shoot twice goes against you.
Yeah. And in this case, he only fired twice. She continued to fight. And you're right. He had to like push and run around her. And then she continued to come after him, which forced him to fire more times. He only ended up striking her 3 times. I don't know how many total rounds that he fired, but that's all within close proximity.
Yeah. So you also have multiple apartments in the backdrop. I mean, obviously those rounds are going to go through walls. So he had to do it regardless. And, luckily nobody else got shot. But I mean, all things to think about when you're in an apartment complex firing your weapon. It was a bad ordeal. I think that officer is incredibly lucky.
Yes.
It doesn't really say the extent of how bad that slashing was, but I mean, in the video, he's bleeding pretty bad.
Yes, and it gets worse and worse as he's standing there. So let's talk about the communication part. So immediately following the shooting, he ends up retreating back, and looks like he's taking like a kneeling position. And I think you can picture that he's trying to process what just happened.
Yeah.
And then he ends up standing up, and it looked like he actually, like you pointed out, like he used this gun to push the gun on the ground to stand up. It was kind of odd. But then he gets on the radio, and all he voices, he initially broadcasts what his identifier was and that he's been shots were fired. And that's something we talk about often is radio communication, the importance of actually describing what happened, because that's going to dictate the response of other officers. In this case, he only stated shots fired. And then you brought up some interesting stuff about dispatch. Can you cover that since you really
so in the video, I mean, it says, so he says shots fired and then dispatch is asking where he's at. And then he gives the address. I can only assume that they knew the address that he was at, like he's on a call for service. So I don't know. I mean, maybe in his head, he just wanted to throw the address out there, which good for him for knowing the address.
Yeah.
He was able to say it. And look, here's the thing. That dude just went through a super traumatic event. He's been slashed in the face. He knows that he's injured pretty bad. He's clearly looking at how bad he's bleeding. And he did stay calm. He was able to communicate, and he was able to put out the address where he was. What we're saying is, if you're ever at training or driving around in your car or whatever, put out radio communication in your head if you have to. If you say it out loud if you're by yourself. But saying it and rehearsing it in your head is a great idea, because you want to paint a picture of what is going on. Hey, shots fired, I'm okay. Or hey, shots fired, I'm injured. I've been slashed in the face. I don't know how bad I'm hurt. I need medics. The suspect is down. They need medics. You're painting a picture for the cops who aren't there, who are responding, who are driving probably 130 miles an hour to get to you, so that they're a little bit more aware of like what it is that they're even responding to, right? If you say, hey, shots fired and nothing else, you're going to assume the worst. If you say shots fired, all officers are okay, suspect is down, the people are responding are going to go, okay, my partner's good. I don't know what's going on. I need to get there, but I know that it's not life-threatening anymore.
And he ended up saying, it took him a little bit to say, the suspect's down and start a medic. And I want to address medics and when you request medics to respond to a scene. So just know, I went through EMT school. You had been through EMT school. I worked on an ambulance. When you request a medic, it's only one medic, and you generally have a paramedic and an EMT or 2 paramedics that respond with an ambulance. That's a team that's going to work on one person. Now, if there's multiple people that have been injured, they triage that and they go for the worst person. So in this case, you have an officer that's been injured, and he knows he's bleeding. You also have a suspect that's been shot. So I would recommend saying, hey, I need 2 medics. I need a medic for myself because I've been injured. Describe what your injury is. And so dispatch can relay that to the medics that are coming so they can be prepared. And then describe, I need another medic for the suspect that's been shot. Because what's going to happen is you're going to have medics respond, and then now they get to the scene. They've been told that there's been shots fired. That's generally the information that the medics are going to get because no other information is being put out on the radio. Then they're going to respond and see an officer's been injured and a suspect's been shot, and then they have to make that determination of who are we going to treat, and then they're going to have to request another ambulance. So if you have multiple people injured, you should be requesting multiple ambulances.
Yeah, great point. They're gonna attend to the suspect who's been shot over the officer if your injuries are less significant. So,
all right, there was a lot to take away from today's body cam breakdown. Drop a comment below and let us know if you would do something different or if you have some ideas on tactics that you want to share.
all right, guys. Well, that's it for today's video. Thanks again for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, drop a comment, and we will catch you guys on the next video.
Stay safe and be smart.